They say death is release, a moment of silence after the screaming stops. But for some, death never comes. The Imperium recorded him as dead. Sergeant John Vess, 144th Cadian Mechanized, killed in action during the fall of Awakens Station. His name carved into stone, his record sealed, his squad burned to nothing in the breach. But the dead do not always rest. Somewhere beyond the reach of the Emperor's light, John Vess woke. No stars, no vox signal, no time, only the echo of war and the whisper of things that never stopped screaming. In the endless dark, faith rots, sanity bleeds, and those who survive learn a final truth. Death is not the end. It's where the Imperium forgets you. This is Endless End. He woke on cold metal, his face pressed to the deck. The smell of promethium and dried blood filled the air. His armor was cracked, his vox speed hissed static. For a moment he thought he was still on Awakens Station. The last memory before blackness, boarding alarms, hull breach, the roar of the warp tearing through steel. Then the silence hit him. No engines, no orders, no gunfire. He stood. The corridor stretched ahead, long and curved, walls of gray plasteel slick with condensation. Dim red lumen streaks flickered like dying embers. The air hummed low, as if the ship itself was still breathing. "Command, this is Vess. Respond." Static. Then a whisper, his own voice, but slower. "Command, this is Vess." He ripped the vox bead out. The echo continued anyway. The ship moaned. Bulkheads flexed. Something alive moved in the walls, pushing against the metal from the inside. He reached for his lasgun. The charge pack was dry. He drew his knife instead. It felt heavier than he remembered. He walked. The floor vibrated with a faint heartbeat rhythm. Ahead, a red glow pulsed from a doorway. He stepped through. The chamber beyond was filled with frozen bodies. Guardsmen, his regiment, standing upright, eyes open, armor blackened. They hadn't fallen. They had been placed, arranged in perfect formation, weapons ready, staring at nothing. He stepped closer. One of them blinked. Vess froze. His pulse spiked. The figure tilted its head, slow and cracking. The sound of bone grinding echoed through the room. "Sergeant," it rasped, voice dry as dust. "You left us." The eyes bled light, red, burning. Every corpse turned its head toward him. The whisper filled the chamber, hundreds of voices speaking in unison. Endless end. The lumen strips flared bright and burst. Darkness swallowed the room. Then came the sound. Metal claws dragging across the floor, closing in from every direction. Vess ran. The corridor twisted as he moved. Bulkheads pulsed like lungs. Vox ghosts screamed fragments of old orders, his own voice issuing commands to men already dead. "Hold the breach, for Cadia, for—" The message cut off. The whisper replaced it. "You already did." He tripped, slammed against a wall. His hand landed on something wet. He looked down. His helmet. The visor cracked, the 144th insignia still visible. Inside, something pulsed, flesh where circuitry should be. It twitched when he touched it. And then a whisper right behind his ear. "Welcome back, Sergeant Vess." The lights flickered. The floor beneath him shifted. He wasn't on Arkan Station anymore. He wasn't anywhere the Emperor could see. He had fallen through the war and into what waited beyond it. Endless end had begun.
The corridor narrowed until Vess had to turn sideways to pass. Steam hissed from vents along the wall. Each burst smelled of rust and blood. The air tasted wrong, thick, heavy, almost alive. He stopped beside a broken control panel. The screen flickered, showing fragments of words in High Gothic. Most of them were unreadable. One phrase repeated over and over. Void breach, level unknown. He stared at the message. His reflection in the screen twitched before he did. It smiled. He tore his gaze away and pressed the Vox control on his chest plate. "Imperial Command, this is Sergeant John Vess of the 144th, requesting extraction. Do you read?" Static filled his helmet. Then a faint reply. 144th, confirmed. Stand by." His pulse spiked. The voice was female. Calm. Too calm. "Identify yourself," Vess said. The reply came after a long pause. "You left us, Sergeant." "That's not... Who is this?" The Vox hissed louder. Words broke apart, then reformed. The voice was his own. "You left us, John." He ripped the cable out. The hiss continued inside his helmet. Not from the Vox anymore. From the walls. Something pounded in the dark, distant but steady. The rhythm of footsteps or a heartbeat. He followed the sound. The corridor widened again into a control chamber. Dozens of screens covered the walls, each showing a different part of the ship. Some glowed faintly, others flickered between images too fast to follow. On one screen, he saw himself, walking into the room, watching the screen, moving closer. He turned around. Nothing behind him. The screen version of him tilted its head and smiled. Every monitor in the chamber went black except one. A single word appeared, white on red. Repent. The door behind him slammed shut. The sound rolled through the ship like thunder. He grabbed a manual release. It didn't move. The air grew hotter. The lights dimmed. From the vents above came a slow, wet, breathing sound. He aimed his lasgun, knowing it wouldn't fire. A shadow moved across the ceiling, then dropped behind him. The floor shook. He turned fast. The thing that stood there had once been human. Its armor still bore the Imperial aquila, but the flesh beneath had melted and fused with the ceramite. The mouth stretched open in a scream that never ended. It took a step forward, then another. Its eyes glowed with the same dull red as the lumen strips. Vess backed toward the console. "Stay back!" The thing stopped. Its head twitched. Then it spoke, voice layered with static. "Sergeant John Vess, you brought this aboard." He shook his head. "No, You called for help. We answered." The creature raised a hand. Bone and metal cracked as it moved. The lights around it flickered and died. Vess lunged for the side hatch. It didn't move, but the metal beneath his touch felt soft like skin. He pushed harder. The surface rippled, then opened with a sound like tearing flesh. He fell through. The passage beyond was narrow and red-lit, lined with cables that pulsed like veins. He could still hear the creature's voice behind him. "You cannot leave, John Vess. The war ended. You didn't." He kept moving. The air grew colder. His breath fogged. His visor display blinked. Life signs detected. Dozens, then hundreds, all around him. He slowed. The whisper came again, softer this time. "Keep walking, soldier. The Emperor watches." It sounded human, familiar. His old commander's tone. He turned on the Vox recorder. "Identify yourself." "Captain Darren Holt, 144th Mechanized," the voice said, calm, clear, impossible. "You're not dead, Vess. None of us are. We're still fighting." He wanted to believe it. He wanted it to be true. Then he saw the wall ahead, covered in hundreds of Imperial Guard helmets, his regiment's mark on each one. Each helmet was nailed into the metal, fused by the heat. Inside, faint movement. Eyes. The voice spoke again. "Report for duty, Sergeant." The helmets began to turn toward him. The corridor ended in a bulkhead door, marked with the Aquila. The metal was scorched black. The words "Gloria Imperator" were carved deep across its surface. Blood filled the letters. Vess wiped the grime from the panel and hit the release. The door stuttered, then slid open halfway before jamming. He forced it wider with his shoulder and stepped through. The room beyond was vast. Rows of pews lined the floor, all facing a cracked altar of stone and steel. The walls were covered in parchment, prayers, oaths, confessions, every scrap pinned with nails or human teeth. At the center of the altar stood a figure in priest's robes, still, hands clasped, head bowed. Vess hesitated. "Father?" The priest didn't move. He approached slowly, lasgun raised. The air inside the chapel was heavier than anywhere else on the ship. Every breath felt like inhaling dust from a grave. When he reached the altar, he saw the truth. The priest's robes were fused into his skin. His flesh had dried into gray parchment. His eyes were gone, replaced by two small Aquilas hammered into the sockets. In front of him lay an open book. Its pages moved, though there was no wind. Words appeared one by one, written in dark liquid that dripped from above. He looked up. The ceiling was covered in hanging bodies, guardsmen, medicae, tech priests, each suspended by cables hooked through their spines. Their blood fed the altar. One of them twitched. Vess staggered back. His boot struck something, an old Vox unit half buried in wax and bone. The signal light blinked green. He turned it on. "Sergeant Vess." The voice was calm, familiar. "Captain Holt?" Vess said. "Where are you?" "Here," the voice replied. "We've been waiting in the chapel. You took your time."
The priest's head lifted, slow. The bones cracked. Its mouth opened wide, far wider than human. The voice came from inside. You abandoned the Emperor's light. You seek forgiveness. You'll have none. The book on the altar burst into flame. The fire burned black. The hanging bodies began to speak, each one whispering the same words in time with the flames. Endless end, endless end, endless end. Vess fired. The lasgun bolts tore through the air, burning holes through the hanging corpses, but the whispers didn't stop. He ran for the exit. The door was gone. The wall had sealed itself. The priest stepped down from the altar, leaving a trail of burning ash. You prayed for silence. Now you serve it. Vess slammed the butt of his weapon against a wall. The metal gave way, opening into a crawl tunnel. He pulled himself through, scraping armor and skin. The heat faded as he crawled deeper into the dark. Then the vox in his helmet crackled again, the voice no longer calm. Sergeant, report. He froze. Captain? You left us in the breach. You watched us burn. You thought you escaped. The tunnel lights flickered. He could see movement behind him, pale hands crawling through the gap he'd come from. He crawled faster. The air shifted, cold, then warm. The tunnel ended in another door, smaller, unmarked. He hit the control and stumbled inside. The door sealed. Silence. Then, from the dark ahead, a faint whisper. John Vess. He raised his weapon. Who's there? The voice came again, clearer now. Someone who remembers dying beside you. The light flickered on. A figure sat against the far wall. Female, in Cadian armor, scorched black. Her face half burned, but he knew her. Lieutenant Mara Keln, his second in command, dead 3 years. You're not real. She smiled. Neither are you. Vess kept his weapon raised. The light in the small chamber was dim and red. The air carried the scent of ozone and burned oil. Mara didn't move. She sat against the bulkhead, armor cracked, eyes dull but aware. Her vox bead blinked with each slow breath she took. You died on Archon Station, he said. So did you. He didn't answer. He studied her, every scar, every mark. It was her, the same voice, the same calm. But the shadows didn't match her shape. They bent the wrong way. She looked down at her hands. You remember the breach, the explosion in the lower hangar? He nodded. We sealed the decks. I tried to pull you out. You didn't. Her voice didn't accuse. It was simple fact. She stood. The motion was wrong, too smooth. You remember what came through the breach. The warp storm. Demons. Korn's mark. Mara nodded once. It wasn't a storm. It was an opening. The ship didn't die. It crossed. Crossed where? between real space and the void, between death and what comes after. She stepped closer. We all stayed. The Emperor didn't take us. The warp didn't claim us. It scraped the wall. I'm not part of this. You already are. She pointed to his left gauntlet. He looked down. The metal had fused into his skin. Black veins spread from the connection point. The ship's alive, John, she said. Every wall, every wire. It feeds on memory. The more you remember, the more it owns you. He tried to tear the glove off. The flesh underneath came away with it. Mara's expression didn't change. The others stopped fighting. They prayed until the prayers turned to screams. Then the screams turned to whispers. The ship learned their names. Why am I still here? Because you still think you can leave. The Vox crackled again. The same voice from before. Captain Holt. Mara, report. The sergeant is with you. She raised her head. Confirmed. Then bring him. Vess stepped back. I'm not going anywhere with you. Mara looked at him. Her face shifted, just slightly, the skin around her eyes cracking. You don't have a choice. The walls pulsed. The floor rippled beneath his boots. He fired a burst from his lasgun. The bolts hit the bulkhead and disappeared into it like drops into water. Mara's eyes glowed faint red. You think this ship obeys you? It remembers what you did, the detonator, the promise you broke. The word detonator hit him like a strike. Images flashed, screaming soldiers, the red flare of a warning rune, his thumb on a trigger that never went off. He had been the one who was supposed to destroy Archon Station, end it before the warp consumed it. But he hesitated, and the station fell. Mara saw it in his eyes. Now you understand. Endless End isn't a place, it's a consequence. The Vox hissed again. Holt's voice again, sharper now. Bring him, Mara. The core is waiting. She stepped toward him. The air shimmered around her. Her body began to break apart into strands of red light. Follow me, she said. The door behind her opened without a sound, revealing a long corridor lined with shifting light. At the far end, a single sound, steady, mechanical, like the beat of a giant heart. Vess hesitated. Mara turned, her voice flat. You can follow, or you can stay here until the ship forgets you too. He looked down the corridor, then back at the sealed room behind him. The whisper came again, from nowhere and everywhere. Endless End.
The corridor narrowed as they walked. The walls pulsed like muscle, contracting around the seams of his armor. A faint hum followed them, low and steady. Each pulse felt timed to his heartbeat. Mara led without speaking. Her footsteps made no sound. The light from the ceiling shifted from red to amber, then to pale bone white. The air grew colder, drier. The scent of metal and ash replaced the chemical tang. "Where are we going?" Vess asked. "To the core," she said, "where the ship thinks. It's a machine. It was. Not anymore." He tightened his grip on the lasgun. The weapon felt heavier now, as if the ship resented its presence. And Holt. You'll see him soon. They reached a bulkhead door. It bore the Aquila, warped beyond recognition. The wings stretched like claws, the skull replaced by an eye that seemed to track movement. Mara placed her hand on the seal. The metal rippled. The door opened with a sigh that sounded disturbingly human. The chamber beyond was vast, cylindrical, descending into blackness. A single pillar rose from the center, metal fused with flesh, cables embedded in veins, machinery breathing through lungs. The entire structure pulsed with a deep red glow. At its base stood Captain Holt, or what was left of him. Half his body was metal, half exposed muscle. His jaw had been replaced with a vox grill that buzzed softly as he spoke. "Sergeant Vess, you made it." Vess stepped forward, eyes scanning the cables that connected Holt to the pillar. "What happened to you?" "The ship remembered me first. It offered me a choice, serve or be forgotten." Mara moved to stand beside him. Her voice was flat. "He chose to serve." "You brought me here," Vess said. "Why?" "To finish what you started." Holt's mechanical fingers tightened around a control lever at his side. "You tried to destroy Archon's station. You failed. The explosion didn't cleanse the corruption. It merged with it. The station crossed the threshold. This is what remained." Vess stared at the pillar. The red glow inside it flickered with images, faces, thousands of them, human and not, screaming, melting, reforming. The ship became aware, fed by the blood spilled in the breach, fed by every soul trapped within the warp. We call it the heart. "And you serve it?" "I direct it," Holt said. "It remembers what we were, soldiers, servants, instruments of the Imperium's will. But here we have purpose. We preserve order within the chaos." Vess raised his weapon. "You're part of the corruption." Holt smiled, a sound like grinding gears. "We all are. The only difference is how much we control it." The heart pulsed. The air thickened, vibrating with energy. The faces inside the pillar began to move, pressing against the membrane as if begging to escape. "Every mind that enters the heart becomes part of its memory. Yours will too, but you'll keep yourself if you accept the link." Vess took a step back. "You're asking me to surrender." "I'm offering you survival." Mara turned to him. Her eyes were hollow now, pale light leaking from the sockets. "The ship remembers pain. The longer you resist, the more it feeds." Vess shook his head. "You're slaves." Holt's tone sharpened. "We're alive, and that's more than most who walk these corridors." The heart flared. The light turned crimson. The faces screamed in unison. The sound shook the chamber. Holt reached for the lever. "Choose, Vess. Serve the heart or become one with it." Vess fired. The last bolt struck Holt in the chest. The captain didn't fall. The wound closed instantly, sealing with living metal. "Wrong choice," Holt said. The heart screamed again. The floor split open. Tendrils of flesh and cable surged upward, wrapping around Vess's legs. He fired again and again, but the tendrils absorbed each shot. The weapon overheated and died. Mara's voice was almost kind. "It's too late. Once the ship knows your name, it doesn't let go." Vess roared and tore at the cables. His gauntlet sparked. His flesh burned. He pulled until something gave way, and the heart reacted. The red light dimmed. The screams turned to whispers. Holt stumbled. The connection between him and the pillar flickered. Vess reached for the control console. The detonator rune blinked. The same design he had failed to trigger at Archon Station. He pressed it.
For a moment, everything stopped. The sound, the light, even breath. Then the chamber erupted in white fire. Mara vanished. Holt screamed as the cables tore free. The pillar split down the middle, spilling molten light across the floor. Vess fell backward into darkness. When he opened his eyes, there was silence. No light, no sound. Only his heartbeat. And then the whisper returned. Endless end. He smiled, though he didn't know why.
The transmission reached them after 8 standard hours. A simple Imperial beacon. Origin: Arkan Station debris field. Status: 1 survivor. Sergeant John Vess. The Vigilant Dawn broke warp first. An Imperial Navy cruiser, ancient and pitted, its hull painted in the black and silver of the Segmentum Obscurus fleet. Captain Rawl of the Dawn stared at the transmission rune. It pulsed steady, rhythmic. Too perfect. "Location confirmed?" he asked. "Confirmed, Lord Captain," replied the Vox officer. "Signal strength increasing. It's synchronized with our own Auspex sweep." Rawl frowned. "How synchronized?" "Exactly, sir. Same frequency, same pulse." That was the first sign. The second came when the ship's choir began to scream. Astropaths, 9 of them, collapsed in unison. Their sockets bled. One managed to whisper before dying, "It breathes." Rawl stood in silence for a long moment. Then he gave the order. "Deploy a landing team. Retrieve the survivor. Burn everything else." The wreckage of the ship that once was Arkan Station hung in orbit like a carcass. Steel fused with bone. Silence. Cold. The strike team moved through the wreck with weapons raised, servo lamps cutting across blackened corridors. "Sergeant Vess," the lead officer called. "This is Lieutenant Crail of the Imperial Navy. Respond." A faint noise crackled through the Vox. "Crail?" "Repeat. Identify yourself." The voice grew clearer, distorted by static. "Sergeant Vess, loyal to the Emperor, requesting extraction." "Copy that. Homing on your signal." The squad moved deeper. The halls were unnaturally clean. No debris, no blood, just smooth metal walls, rippling faintly beneath the light. Private Lorne froze mid-step. "Sir, the walls, they're warm." Crail touched his gauntlet to the surface. It pulsed once beneath his palm. "Keep moving." They reached the chamber. Vess sat in the center, armor stripped to the chest plate, face pale but unscarred. His eyes glowed faintly red beneath the shadow of his helmet. "Sergeant Vess, you're safe now." Vess looked up slowly. "No one's safe." "Med team, move in." The corpsmen approached. One touched Vess's shoulder. "You're hurt." The man convulsed. Blood burst from his nose and ears. His body hit the floor, twitching once before going still. The rest of the team aimed their weapons. "Hold fire!" Crail shouted. Vess raised his hand. "You shouldn't have come." The ship groaned around them. The metal beneath their boots rippled like liquid. Veins of red light spread outward from Vess's feet, racing through the floor, up the walls, across the ceiling. Crail shouted into his Vox, "Command, abort extraction! Burn the wreck, now!" Static. The walls began to breathe. From somewhere deep in the hull came the echo of thousands of voices whispering in unison. The heart had found its new vessel. Vess stood,
movement slow but deliberate. His voice was calm. The Emperor wanted order. I give him continuity. Fire! Bolter rounds tore through him, burning holes through armor and flesh. He didn't fall. The wound sealed with each pulse of red light. Fire again! Nothing changed. The ship's core pulsed once, bright enough to blind them all. Then the whispers stopped. Creel blinked and found himself standing alone. His squad was gone. The chamber was empty. Only the red pulse remained. He looked at his wrist display. It read a single message. Vigilant dawn, assimilated. The transmission beacon flared to full strength, broadcasting across the segmentum. Survivor located, vessel secured. In the bridge of the Vigilant Dawn, Captain Rawls stared at the repeating signal. The ship's servitors turned their heads toward him in perfect unison. Their eyes glowed red, and deep in the void, the heart whispered to itself. Endless end continues.
The Imperium heard the signal long before they saw its source. Across 3 sectors, the same pulse repeated through the void. Survivor located, vessel secured. No distortion, no drift, perfect synchronization. On the world of Karthus Reach, the astropathic choir began to scream, every one of them. Their bodies convulsed as they chanted a single phrase between bursts of blood. Endless end, endless end, endless end. The transmission spread like infection, through vox relays, warp channels, and psychic echoes. The more they tried to cut the signal, the faster it multiplied. Within the Vigilant Dawn, Captain Rawls sat alone on his bridge. His officers stood silent at their stations, eyes empty, faces pale. He knew then that the ship no longer belonged to him. The air grew heavy, filled with whispers. Order from decay, continuity through flesh. He drew his bolt pistol and pressed it under his chin. For the Emperor. The trigger clicked. The pistol didn't fire. A calm voice echoed through the command deck. Energy feeds me, Captain. You taught me that. Raoul turned slowly. Sergeant John Vess stood at the viewport, armor reformed into living metal, veins of red light pulsing across his chest. His face was no longer human, half bone, half machine, all alive. You survived the core, Raoul said, voice shaking. Vess looked at him. His eyes glowed brighter. I didn't survive. I adapted. The heart, Raoul whispered. It was never the ship. The heart was the idea, the will to persist. It found a vessel in me, and now it spreads through every thought that touches it. You mean? Yes, Vess said. Every mind that hears my signal becomes part of it. Raoul staggered back. You've doomed billions. No, Vess replied. I've connected them. The floor beneath them pulsed. The red light spread across the deck, through the consoles, into the walls. The ship's systems came alive with a sound like breathing. On the Vox, new voices joined, officers from other ships calling for orders, each one repeating the same words. Survivor located. Vessel secured. Vess turned to the viewport. The Vigilant Dawn's escort fleet drifted in the dark, engines dormant. One by one their lights turned red. Raoul fell to his knees. What are you doing?" "Finishing it," Vess said. "The Imperium wanted unity. The heart will give it to you." Raoul whispered a prayer, but the words died in his throat. Vess raised his hand. The red glow filled the bridge, swallowing everything. Outside, the fleet began to move as one. Dozens of ships aligned, engines burning the same rhythm, their transmissions merging into a single endless signal that bled into the warp. Across the galaxy, astropaths heard the pulse and froze. Worlds fell silent. Machines began to hum without power. Servitors spoke without command. And in the deepest vaults of Terra, where the Emperor's psychic light flickered weakly through the Astronomicon, the choir trembled. For the first time in 10,000 years, another heartbeat answered his own. Not brighter, not stronger, just constant, unyielding, endless. The pulse continued, through ship, through flesh, through faith. The Imperium would never call it a victory, but the heart did not care for victory, only for continuation. And in the cold dark between stars, the whisper spread, calm, eternal, certain. Endless end.